Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tina. I am the Capability Building Coordinator for Connecting Up. Connecting Up is a part of the Info Exchange Group. Info Exchange is a not-for-profit social enterprise that has delivered technology for social justice for over 25 years. With over 100 staff across Australia and New Zealand, we tackle the biggest social challenges through the smart and creative use of technology. I'd like to welcome you all to the webinar Using Technology to Support People Experiencing Family Violence, which will be facilitated by Lena Bates from Info Exchange. We'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please type it into the questions box on your webinar panel and I'll be able to assist you through there. If you have any questions during the session, please also type it into the questions box and we will answer them in the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. Please note that your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. If you are on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar. If possible, please close all other programs to help you have the best experience. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you shortly after the webinar ends. Before we start, I'd also like to remind you that there will be a short survey at the end of the webinar. We'd appreciate it if you took a few minutes to provide us with some feedback. So that's all from me for now. I'll pass it over to Lena to get things started. Thanks, Lena.
Thank you, Tina. Family violence is a complex issue and people experience violence differently. Research tells us that the majority of people experiencing violence also experience some form of technology-facilitated abuse, but technology is also playing an important role in helping victim survivors, and that's why we're here today. On this webinar, we've got Rosalie O'Neill, Manager, eSafety Women, Office of the eSafety Commissioner, Karen Bentley, National Director, the Women's Services Network, WESNET, Liz Ratcliffe, Project Officer, Family Violence and Tech Safety, Domestic Violence Resource Centre Victoria, otherwise known as DVRCV, Leonie Burnham, State Coordinator for the Personal Safety Initiative, Domestic Violence Victoria. We're going to hear from these experts on some of the recent work that they're doing to support people with experiencing violence and the way that they're supporting them through using technology. We're also going to hear some of the ways that technology is being misused. And we're going to round out the webinar with some information for generalist service providers on when to refer to specialist family and domestic violence services. We'll finish with some discussion and questions at the end, so please send them through. So I'm Lena, I'm from the Ask Izzy team here at Info Exchange, and we've been working with service providers across Australia to make Ask Izzy safer and easier to use for people experiencing violence. For those of you who don't know what Ask Izzy is, it is a mobile designed website that connects you to the services that you need now. It's driven by the largest health and community services database in Australia, giving you access to 370,000 services nationwide in the palm of your hand. It was co-designed with people experiencing homelessness, and that means it was built with people experiencing homelessness by people experiencing homelessness, and that was using a human-centered design approach. We've had over 2 million searches on Ask Izzy since launch 3 years ago. So from 2017 to 2018, searches have increased by 91%, and we're currently getting 150,000 searches per month. With the help of the NAB Foundation, Info Exchange has launched some really important enhancements to Ask Izzy, and that's come about because the data, that's come about because the data is showing 57% of Ask Izzy users are women, and 20% of users seeking housing support on Ask Izzy are women and children escaping family violence. The enhancements aim to help people experiencing family violence to safely find the help they need. So I'll walk you through those enhancements now. You can see we've added a new domestic violence category. We've also got safety screening questions to help people in immediate danger, as well as emergency state and national numbers, and best practice technology, safety tips and warnings for users. For those of you who haven't used Ask Izzy before, you can see that you then go on to enter your location and search based on needs. And in this section, we've included experiencing and using violence categories. So there are multiple pathways to family violence services. You then go on to select the type of support that you need. which then allows you to scroll through to listings and click through to more information for each service. The final enhancement is the inclusion of the quick exit button to quickly close the site without raising suspicion. As you can see here, it's just gone to the BOM website. And while this can be helpful in some circumstances, it's really important to know that the quick exit button doesn't delete your browser history. So it's really important that we're working with clients, that we're educating them so that they can make informed choices. So a good prompter question is this a safe device to use? So we've been busy rolling out community engagement across Victoria. So far, we've met with 600 students, service providers, victim survivors, as well as the NAB customer assist teams, who they're really loving having another resource that they're able to provide their customers with when they call through for financial hardship. And we're now heading off to Brisbane and Perth to hold some events in collaboration with the eSafety Commissioner's Office. And at those events, the Ask Izzy team, we're going to be sharing the new enhancements that are made possible by the NAB Foundation. And eSafety Women will be providing training for frontline workers on tech-facilitated abuse. I'm actually now going to hand over to Rosalie, who manages the eSafety Women's program, and she's going to be talking about tech-facilitated abuse and the role of the eSafety Commissioner's Office in family and domestic violence. I'll pass to you. Thank you, Rosalie.
Thanks, Lena, very much. And thanks very much for inviting us to speak to you today about the work of the eSafety Commissioner. We were established in 2015 as the Office of the Children's eSafety Commissioner, but this was changed in 2017, and our role is now to help all Australians have safe and positive experiences online. And we do this by providing leadership, through researching, through raising awareness of the issues around being safe online, through providing information, advice, and most importantly, education and training. We also play a formal role in investigating reports of illegal content online, of cyberbullying of children, and of image-based abuse. And each one of those I'll talk about briefly later. But we also, with the eSafety program, which is the one that eSafety Women program, the one that I manage, we train domestic and family violence frontline workers to help them identify and deal with the technology facilitated abuse that their clients might be experiencing. I mean, the statistics really do speak for themselves. Since the age of 15, 1 in 4 Australian women has experienced emotional abuse from a current or former partner. 1 in 6 Australian women has experienced physical or sexual violence from a current or former partner. And a 2015 survey of frontline workers found that 98% had clients whose cases involved tech-facilitated abuse. So it is a very, very common, almost universal issue. So eSafety Women is framed as a way of helping those women, of empowering those women to manage their technology risks. So we provide practical tools and information to equip all women to protect themselves and their families against all forms of online abuse. We train frontline workers in the DV sector, and we give them the knowledge and skills to support women and their families. And we do actively try to raise awareness and understanding of technology facilitated abuse, to help all women identify it, but also to put it, to make it, to convince all of these workers that it is a real form of abuse, and it is a very impactful form of abuse as well. The site, we have a lot of information there for women and for frontline workers, including checklists, how-to videos, case study videos, and so on, to help them understand the technology in your lives and how to stay in control. But what is technology facilitated abuse? Well, we look at it as being broadly categorized into 4 main areas, but bear in mind that abusers can use many of these at once or only a few. And it's never just tech facilitated abuse. It's always part of a bigger picture of abuse and involving both online and offline forms of abuse and control. But also things can change quickly in the pattern of abuse that a woman is experiencing. So we look at harassment, technology-based harassment. So technology used to annoy, to threaten, to harass, to intimidate, such as making numerous unwanted calls or sending text to a person's mobile phone, sending menacing or threatening images, and that kind of behaviour. Monitoring and stalking, so accessing a person's technology either physically or remotely to just keep an eye on their activities or to track their activities. You can use location services to track someone's location, hack into their emails or social media accounts. You could use surveillance devices to spy on a person. But it's also broadly, it's the information that the woman or her friends and family might put out about themselves that can be put together, the puzzle can be put together for a perpetrator to find out what she's up to. There are also impersonator accounts, so pretending to be someone in order to damage their reputation or their self-esteem, their new relationship, or perhaps their job. So impersonating them on social media and sending abusive messages as if it was them to, friends, families, and employer, or creating fake accounts either to sort of get under the defenses of the woman and then abuse in turn, to harass and cause fear. Or setting up, a range of proxy accounts, or getting friends and family to pile on the abuse through that. With threats and the use of technology to threaten, to harm, to humiliate, and that includes image-based abuse, so the threat to share or the actual sharing of an intimate image, but also sending threats of violence and harm, or explicit threats and implicit threats. So that can be, I'm going to do this to you, or I know where you are, or I know where the children are, and I'm going to do that kind of thing. Also, we hear about a woman being punished by being locked out of her own accounts or having her technology taken away. So that isolates her from her support networks. We know that abusers can intentionally make threats in very obscure ways or indirect ways, so they can avoid being seen to breach protective orders. Yet the woman knows that it's a threatening intent and may be very, very afraid as a result. I mentioned that we run our workshops, 2-hour workshops, intensive workshops, to help frontline workers learn about technology-facilitated abuse and what can happen. We also have an online learning system, and the URL will be at the end of this presentation, but that enables frontline workers in remote areas to obtain training, access training, to really bring them up to speed with the skills and knowledge that they need. But now, having kind of looked at what's gone wrong, we'll think about the positive, how technology can be used well so that we can get the best out of it. And just bearing in mind too that we would never ever say or never suggest that a woman just turns off her phone or just doesn't use social media, because that is not a realistic solution at all. That will isolate her from her support networks, from the support she's obtaining from you, but also from her day-to-day life and access to normal services like banking and government services. It's just not a feasible option. So in using technology safely, we think of it in 3 Ps. That's being smart with your devices, using strong passcodes and passwords, things that are not easily guessed, when it is safe to do so. And sometimes, in a woman's situation, and she knows her situation best, it's not necessarily safe for her to change her passwords and passcodes, because that will let her abuser know that there are changes happening and it might escalate her risk. You should know how to block contacts, how to report abusive manners, how to log out of your online accounts, especially if you're using a computer or a device that's shared with the perpetrator. To turn off Bluetooth, to limit access to use of public Wi-Fi, and to keep operating systems up to date to protect against malware, and to check privacy and security settings after every single update, because sometimes they change and sometimes they revert to less private and less secure ones. We want women to be smart with social media, so that means enabling 2-factor authentication to give an extra layer of security. Again, putting strong passwords on their accounts, to check and double check the privacy settings of each account to make sure that they are only sharing content with the people they want to share with. To think about how much information and what kind of information, particularly personal or identifying information, that they're sharing, particularly if they are needing to keep their location details secure or private from their perpetrator. So that means avoiding checking in or being tagged in posts by you or by others. And to be only accept friend requests when they're 100% certain that they're genuine. Again, keep antivirus and malware software up to date. And finally, to be alert to other technology. And there are another range of apps, location services, things like Fitbits and health, that kind of tracking technology. But anywhere else where you might have an online presence, to make sure that you know who can access that information, and it's not giving away information about you that you don't want to share, that it's unsafe to be shared. I wanted to speak really briefly about our image-based abuse function, which we established in 2017. We have a reporting portal, and this late last year, this was further supported by the enactment of legislation giving us an enforcement role, a civil penalty scheme which sits alongside the criminal provisions of each state and territory except Tasmania. Look, image-based abuse impacts all Australians, but it does particularly impact women and girls, and it's been colloquially called revenge porn, but this is a really problematic term because it's not representative of the range of scenarios that we hear about, and it places blame on the victim. It's not necessarily revenge, and it's not necessarily porn, but it is abuse, and so we need to call it for what it is. Our research conducted in 2017 found that 1 in 10 Australians have experienced image-based abuse, and this significantly increases to 1 in 5 for women aged 18 to 45 years and 1 in 4 for Indigenous Australians. And the impact really is severe because it not only affects victims' mental, physical and emotional well-being, it impacts on their relationship with friends and family, their jobs, education, and in some cases they've moved interstate to escape shame and humiliation. And you just got to imagine how devastating it must be. Our portal presents a range of pathways available for victims to take action against the perpetrator and, if necessary, access support services or legal assistance. Through our portal, victims can make a report to us and request that their intimate images be removed online. As at the end of April 2019, we've received more than 980 reports concerning over 1,700 URLs. We've been successful in getting material taken down in about 80% of those cases, and about 60% of those cases concerned female victims, but we do see a fairly high proportion of reports from males as well. IBA, from our point of view, from our definition, occurs when intimate images are shared or there's a threat to share without consent. So it's the key question there is not, was the image taken with or without consent? It's the sharing without consent. So for the purposes of our civil penalty scheme, the definition of an intimate image, it has 3 main components. Does the image feature private parts or private activity? That means, you're in a state of undress, you're using the toilet, having a bath or a shower, or engaged in sort of activities that are not normally done in public. And the third pin of this would be showing a person who would normally wear attire of a religious or cultural significance, but without it. So, that is also deemed to be an intimate image, and it includes video and digitally altered material. So it can include an image that appears to depict a person or a part of their body, regardless of whether it actually depicts that person. Just to wrap up, the other 2 schemes I wanted to talk about was our cyberbullying scheme, which was established in 2015. And that is intended to help children under the age of 18 who are being targeted by serious cyberbullying material. It gives them an avenue to report and an avenue to have also that content taken down from public view. There are 4 steps to reporting cyberbullying. The first step is actually to report it to the service that appears on, because they have 48 hours to remove that content. But if you're not satisfied with the response, then you can report it to us and we will liaise with the social media company on your behalf. We've received more than 1,300 complaints about cyberbullying since our scheme began, and that number is increasing month by month. The final reporting scheme I wanted to talk about is our cyber report scheme, and where we investigate and liaise with law enforcement around the country about offensive and illegal content online, and that is principally child sexual abuse material. You can access the reporting form on our website, esafety.gov.au, as you can with all of our other resources. And on the screen now, you've got the slide which has got esafety.gov.au, the women, and the frontline workers training, and the image-based abuse reporting portal. So I think on that note, I might wind up and hand over to our next speaker. But thank you, Lena, very much for the opportunity to talk to you about the work we do.
Thank you, Rosalie, much appreciated. And we've got a few more spots for that frontline worker training in Brisbane and Perth, and we'll send out a registration link following the webinar for anyone who's interested. Let's now hear from Karen at WesNet. WesNet is the women's peak body which works on behalf of women and children who are experiencing family and domestic violence. Karen will be talking to us about smartphones for survivors and frontline training for workers.
Thanks, Lena, and it's lovely to be here. If I can have the next slide, that'd be fabulous. I hope everybody's well today, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of all the lands that we're working on today across the country. I want to talk to you today about Safe Connections, which is a program, if I can have the next slide, which is designed to basically give smartphones to women who haven't got them. And this is on the basis that we believe that all women should have access to technology, because certainly in Australia, we really love our phones and our smartphones and access to the internet. And in fact, a recent study showed that we average about 1.1 smartphones per every person in Australia. And we're increasingly reliant on phones to access technology and the internet and to do things that we need to do every day. So we find that telling women to get off technology to avoid the abuse which they're inevitably on the receiving end of as part of domestic and family violence is really not something that we'd like to advocate. We really would like to help women stay on technology. So back in 2014, Telstra approached WesNet to see if there was anything that they could do to help us with the work that we've been doing around the intersection between technology and violence against women. And we said, yes, we've got a lot of women who are turning up to refuges and shelters and other kinds of specialised domestic family violence services with no phones. So they've started donating phones to us, along with $30 prepaid credit, which is designed to help any woman who's experiencing domestic or family violence get access to a brand new smartphone. In addition to that, WesNet trains the frontline workers of the agencies who've got the phones to give out. And at the moment, we're funded till the end of June 2020, but we're currently seeking more funding. The idea of the program is basically to provide women who are experiencing technology-facilitated abuse with a means to connect with personal and professional sources of support. She doesn't have to be experiencing technology-facilitated violence, she just needs to be experiencing domestic violence or some other form of gender-based violence. And the phone is designed to help her reduce her isolation, but it's also designed to help her interrupt the abusive patterns of power and control that she might be experiencing by giving her the knowledge, information and support that she needs to use technology in ways that support and help her stay safe. There's nothing actually magical about the phones that Telstra is giving to WesNet, that WesNet gives out through the network of agencies we've got. They are just basic smartphones. They do connect to the internet and they do allow apps to be downloaded just like any smartphone. But there's nothing specifically built into these phones that actually makes them safe. The safety aspect actually comes through the training that we provide to the frontline agencies that are giving out the phones to women. And it works in a sort of four-way partnership. So Telstra provides the phones, WesNet sort of manages those phones and distributes them out through a network of 276 at the moment frontline agencies. And those agencies all operate with a case management and risk and safety planning approach. So most of them are specialist domestic and family violence assault services, but we do have a range of other legal centres. We've got one emergency department. We've got various police stations around Australia that have got a stock of these phones. We send them out to them and they have them ready on hand for for the next woman who walks into their service and needs a phone. And we then train those frontline agencies so that they understand some of the ways in which technology or smartphones are misused, and so they can help women actually set those phones up in a way that's really safe and doesn't inadvertently make them at more risk. The training that we do sort of focuses on how abusers misuse the phones, and we've just listed there some of the ways that we commonly see. They're very similar to the ones that Rosalie outlined earlier. We also concentrate on how to help clients or victims document what's happening to them. Perhaps that might be used in an evidence scenario later if they do need to go to police or seek justice outcomes. We also really try to help with safety planning and just increasing frontline workers' understanding about how to do risk and safety assessment with their clients so that she can put a safety plan in place. And we've also got a series of resources and support that the frontline workers can get access to. In terms of safety planning around technology abuse, it can be really challenging for a lot of different reasons. One of the things that we find a lot is that the basic lack of knowledge about how technology works can lead both survivors and workers to kind of overestimate the perpetrator's ability, which means that sometimes it feels like he can do a lot more than he actually can. Sometimes it means sometimes people's lack of knowledge about how tech works means that what a victim is describing can really sound like she's got a mental health issue, or that she's in some kind of sci-fi land. And so we do find that quite often women who are experiencing tech abuse are just sort of written off as, oh, that's not happening. That's too sort of sci-fi. That's not really happening, and they can be seen as paranoid or mentally ill. But it's also it's often a symptom of the gaslighting that perpetrators use when they're using technology. Untrained workers or people who don't have a good understanding around how technology can be misused often expect that the way to solve the problem is to ask the survivor or the victim to just get off the technology. But we really try to work with clients and survivors to make sure that she makes the decisions around what to do. A lot of victims of technology facilitated abuse or domestic violence will actually keep those communication channels open because they want to monitor what their perpetrator is doing. The most common reasons I thought you might be interested in for women to need a phone is because they've arrived or their phone has been damaged or destroyed by the abuser. Quite often their phones are compromised because they're being used to track either through apps that are downloaded onto phones or because some app or shared accounts are being used. Clients frequently tell us that they're being abused through their phones, through constant text messaging or abusive messages or posts online. Many women can't afford a new phone, so they just simply don't have the funds to be able to access one. So it's often really good for them to be able to get access to a phone and prepaid credit. And increasingly, we're seeing frontline workers using this a second phone as part of a safety plan. WESNet has been working in this space for quite some time, and we really operate at that intersection between all forms of violence against women and technology. So we have a website that's dedicated specifically to frontline workers and clients or survivors who are experiencing both technology abuse and some form of gender-based violence. And we've got a range of handouts on all forms of technology. We update that on a regular basis. Shortly, we're about to have legal guides, which we've developed with Domestic Violence Resource Centre Victoria and Women's Legal Services New South Wales, which talk about the legislation that's in place in every jurisdiction across Australia in relation to technology and violence against women. We also run training and webinars, and we've got access to those through that website. You can register for the Phones program through our phones.wesnet.org.au website, although I have to say at the moment there's a waiting list because we have got much more demand for to be on that program than we can provide at the moment. And we also have the 1800 WESNet number, which is a secondary consult line specifically designed for frontline workers. So if you are working with a client who's experiencing tech abuse and you need some secondary consult to just help you work out what's going on and what to do, we're available through that. You can also get a phone for a client through that number, inquire about the training. But just to quick note, we're not a crisis service, so please just keep that number to the frontline workers. And I think that's all from me. So I'll hand back to you, Lena, before handing over to the next speaker. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Karen. It's so clear that despite technology facilitated abuse, that technology is such a vital tool for victim survivors. And we've got Liz on the line from Domestic Violence Resource Centre Victoria, the statewide resource centre working to prevent and respond to family violence. And Liz's role focuses on technology facilitated violence in intimate partner relationships, and her work over the last 18 months is centred on the development of a tech resource, ARC, for women experiencing violence. And she's going to tell us about that today and the transition from their last resource, Smart Safe Plus. So welcome, Liz.
Thanks, Lena, and thank you for having me. So yes, as Lena said, DVRCV is a statewide resource centre working to prevent and respond to family violence, with a particular focus on men's violence against women. We provide training, publications, research, and resources to practitioners, as well as resources for women experiencing family violence. And one such resource was the Smart Safe Plus app, which was developed in 2015, designed specifically to help women who were thinking about applying for an intervention order or had an order in place, and this was being breached. So DVRCV came to this point, or came to this direction, around thinking about creating a tech resource following research into tech facilitated abuse, looking at how tech was being used and also the prevalence. So the first piece of research was state-based, called SmartSafe in 2013, and then followed up with Recharge in 2015, which was done in partnership with WESNet and Women's Legal Service New South Wales. So following on from that, DVRCV had the intent to reframe smartphones as a tool to empower women rather than a tool for abuse. So in 2017, DVRCV received funding from the Victorian Government Public Sector Innovation Fund and DSS to review and enhance the SmartSafe Plus app. What we have learned over the last few years that SmartSafe Plus has been in use directly from women using the app is that while some women wanted an app to collect formal evidence that they could take to legal or support services, many others simply wanted somewhere where they could collate information about their experiences as a sense check or confirmation of what had happened to them in cases where an abusive intimate partner was gaslighting them. And as such, we created a new app called ARC, which is a tool that enables women to do both of these things and much more. ARC is an interactive app and website that provides women an opportunity to identify, document, and record patterns of intimate partner behavior that make them feel scared, unsafe, or intimidated. ARC has been built on the learnings of SmartSafe Plus and retains the core function as being a secure tool, but has some key differences based on the voices of women who have experienced family violence. The major shift with ARC is that it is more visible and directly searchable on the app stores because women told us they needed something that was easier to find and easier to use. We also had significant and invaluable input and advice from key stakeholders, including my fellow webinar speakers today, so thank you all, as well as from specialist family violence practitioners, community counselling, drug and alcohol, disability services, called services, police, legal, and the Magistrates Court, with the aim to create a resource that may be helpful for many different women in varying circumstances. For some women, ARC may represent an online diary or reflection tool or help them identify patterns of behaviour. In cases where perpetrators gaslight or deny violent behaviour, ARC may provide women with reassurance that they haven't imagined abuse. And ARC may help some victim survivors explain their story to a friend, family member, or support services, or to provide key information to police, in court, or with legal, family violence, and community service practitioners, and reduce, hopefully, the number of times that they have to repeat their story. So what can ARC do? ARC gives opportunity for women to use a tool they have with them every day, their phones, to track details of what's happening by uploading photos, video, audio, and diary entries to create a record of what has happened, when it's happened, and how it made them feel. It also allows, also builds a visual summary of the experiences over time, which can potentially help to identify any patterns, looking at frequency linked to forms of abusive behavior, and also how that's making that person feel. Another new feature of ARC is that people are able to create a report with the ability to be selective of the entries that they've included, potentially specific to, say, if you're seeing a financial counsellor, you can select any entries that are related to financial instances and send via email or view only in ARC. And ARC, how it sets itself apart from, the ordinary ways of keeping track of what's happening for someone. Many women, do write down what's happening potentially in a diary, in Google Docs, in email, is that ARC is a secure tool that has a password protected account, and any information entered into the app is saved off the device encrypted. So if the phone is lost or damaged, the information entered is not lost. So ARC is one of the many tools that can help women experiencing family violence take control over the situation and the decisions they make now and in the future. ARC is not designed to replace face-to-face support services that are critical to women navigating their experience, but is designed in recognition that many women can't or don't want to access support services, and ARC may reach them and may in turn lead to connecting to support services. We know women experiencing family violence have more power when they have information in their own hands, and we know that resources we create have been informed by what they tell us they need, coupled with practitioner expertise. Women are the experts in their life and best judges of their situation. They make minute-to-minute decisions about how to manage their own safety, and the choice whether to download the ARC app or not is no different. An app is not always appropriate. However, women knowing that there are resources that they can have access to and use if and when they need to is our overall aim at DVRCV. And while DVRCV is Victorian-based, tech knows no bounds, and ARC is available across Australia. And we're going to be focusing in the latter part of this year about raising awareness in other states and building the presence of ARC. And so if anyone listening today is practicing or working in other parts of Australia and you're interested in knowing more about ARC or informing redevelopments or enhancements to our technology, please do get in contact, and you can email at the email at the bottom of the screen, arc@dvrcv.org.au, and you'll reach me, Liz, and I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody about using ARC or learning more about the technology. So that's just a brief overview of the app ARC, and I'll hand back to Lena to pass on to our next speaker. Thank you again.
Thanks, Liz. It's so interesting to hear the evolution to a more visible resource. We've also got Leonie Burnham on the call from Domestic Violence Victoria, which is the peak body for specialist family violence services for women and children Victoria. They are an independent non-government organisation, and Leonie's going to talk to us today about using technology to stay safe at home. Thanks, Leonie.
Yeah. Thanks, Lena, and thanks to all my colleagues for their fabulous presentations. As Lena mentioned, I'm from Domestic Violence Victoria, which is the peak organisation for all the specialised family violence services in Victoria. And we don't provide direct service, but what we do is have a practice development unit, and that consists of coordinators like myself that try and look at programs from a statewide level and try and support the practice, the frontline workers, and ensure that the practice that's being delivered across Victoria is quite consistent in how we go about things. Very different organisation to some of my colleagues that have spoken. So you've been given some fantastic information and tips and great resources today and websites on how to work with victim survivors and how to provide them with tools and skills to identify and protect themselves from abuse through technology and how to stay safe with their devices. I'm going to talk a little bit about how technology can support the safety plans. Karen from WesNet mentioned earlier how important the safety plan is for a victim survivor when moving forward. And I'm going to be talking today a little bit about how technology can support those safety plans as part of that comprehensive response that comes from a specialised family violence services. Family violence services have moved towards supporting victim survivors to remain in their homes safely rather than uproot their lives and escape the violence. In the past, they're often refuges were the only place and certainly still serve a very important purpose. But one of the things we've learned over time is that if we can allow our victim survivors and children to be able to remain in their home, it is far less traumatic for them than having to uproot. But of course, in order to do that, they need to be able to be safe. There's lots of strengths in having a safe at home approach. One is, of course, it's a homelessness prevention strategy to hopefully provide a viable option for the victim, survivor and family to remain in that home as an alternative to finding crisis support. It's an economic security strategy if it's possible for the victim survivor to be able to remain in their own home and be able to support those costs, which obviously are often quite difficult, but it will allow them that security financially. But it has to be integrated into a whole of response system that's supported by the specialised case management that comes through family violence agencies. It also needs to be focused on maximising the safety in that home and be supported by the justice responses through intervention orders to exclude the perpetrator from the home, but also the safety measures that need to be around to improve the security within and around that home. So fundamental to safe at home approaches is that the victim survivors remain central to decision making and are empowered to consider their own safety needs. And again, Karen and a few other speakers have touched upon that. It's critical to know that they need to be supported by a response system that provides a framework to assess their own risk and plan for their own safety. Each state has its own tools to assess that risk and safety for victim survivors, but I can only speak about the Victorian experience. Given the Royal Commission into Family Violence in Victoria, there's been enormous investment into the response system for victim survivors. There have been many reforms across many areas, and that includes the risk assessment tool, which is just about ongoing changes now, and in fact lots of training happening. There's also been changes around the information sharing that can happen across regions and sectors. And one of the other exciting things for us in Victoria was that there's some brokerage available under the flexible support packages. So as part of my role, I'm also the statewide coordinator for that brokerage, which gives me an oversight of how that money is being used and the benefits that can receive. So these packages are designed to assist case managers to work with victim survivors through early intervention, the crisis and the recovery, and to assist with their safety and stability moving forward. This initiative was announced by the government in January 2016, and since then, just to give you an idea of the type of brokerage we're talking about, has allocated $64 million and delivered 19,000 flexible support packages since July 2018. So it's a considerable investment that's come from the government, which is obviously a huge benefit, and I am very aware that not all states are able to have that brokerage. So these brokerages are delivered through 19 specialised family violence services across Victoria in the metropolitan, rural and the regional areas. So given this investment by government, there are still some challenges in this work as the sector supports these victim survivors to be empowered and make applications for these packages for the best possible response for them and their children. So the Personal Safety Initiative, which I'm the coordinator for, has come as one of those recommendations of the Royal Commission, and it is a safe at home strategy. It's looking at how we can consider safety measures and navigate the system to provide the most consistent practice and access to goods and services that are equitable to every victim survivor across Victoria. There's been many challenges in the program to date, and the initiative, I guess, has highlighted some of the nuances of working with a brokerage fund and when you need to engage private providers to deliver services and goods that meet the needs agreed in the individual-centred safety plan, that they still have to be cost effective and they have to be appropriate and have taken time to develop. So the PSI is transitioning into practice across the regions, and we've had a few bumps along the way. But what it has done is shed light on some challenges in practice that I'm happy to share as learnings to others. They're not specific to the program that I'm looking after, but they're more broader comments about how technology and the role it plays in keeping victims survivors safe, rather than how it can be utilised by perpetrators as a weapon of abuse. So personal safety needs to, when you think about personal safety, it needs to include emotional as well as the physical safety. There's certainly been a trend in the past in Victoria, and I suspect other states, to purchase safety devices such as CCTV and mobile duress alarms through either brokerage or other avenues of funding, and not always consider that there are other safety improvements that may be possible. There are security experts out there and they're happy to give you advice on all the considerations of a property might need, but there unfortunately is a common practice to recommend going down the path of technology and purchasing quite expensive items like CCTV cameras and personal safety duress alarms when maybe other more common things haven't been thought about, like just securing the entry points and making sure all the doors close and so forth. Technology as a response in keeping victims survivor does have its limitations. key conversations should be happening with case managers and the clients to unpack the reality of what a security technical device can and can't do. Purchasing a CCTV camera, for example, is a measurable response, but if it's not being monitored by anybody, then how is it actually improving safety? One of the possibilities that CCTV does is gives us the possibility to gather footage of perpetrators and who breach the orders by attending the home. So this footage could be very useful to police to support the prosecutions of perpetrators. However, what the systems are that sit around that storage and viewing the footage is also really important to be having conversations with. Is the quality of the product going to be fit for purpose to be used as evidence in court? Is the victim survivor going to be able to see the footage and what does that look like? Are we building hypervigilance into a victim survivor who's lived in fear often for many years? So all things that need to be considered before going down the path of using that sort of technology. Security companies are a profit-driven industry. They certainly have their registered checks and balances and they must comply with across the nation. However, don't assume that these checks are what's important to them are necessarily aligned with what's important to those of us working in this space. They need training about family violence and they need to be systems of accountability, which are critical in supporting the relationship between two very, very different sectors. And that's the work that I'm currently involved in writing the training programs and developing that work. It's really important that you keep perpetrators centre and their behaviour is centred to these technical responses. Technology can be quite onerous on a victim survivor with demands. They have to be charged, they have to be maintained. There's a risk of being false alarms, which can often then lead to some victim blaming by the security or by the police, saying things like, oh, she didn't keep it charged, she didn't do this, she didn't do that. So security sponsors have to be linked to the behaviour of the abuse and that has been exhibited by the perpetrator. Sharing critical information to that security provider about the behaviour of the abuse is important, but it's also important, obviously, to keep her story as her own. So having boundaries in place and making sure that you're sharing but not oversharing is really important, and that there's some agreed protocols in place about what behaviour may. Obviously, the security companies need to attend the home of the victim survivor in order to put up a camera or do something. And so having very, very clear boundaries and understandings of what that looks like for them. It's been a learning space as we work closely alongside the security industry to support safe at home responses. Technology is certainly an important part of security measures and important to the safety of victims and survivors and children, but we need to be a part of a broader system that supports them. And understanding the strengths and limitations of the technology as a tool of safety is really important. So we've heard from everyone today about the safety planning and how important it is to work with victim survivors to understand technology and to listen to them about their own security and what safety means to them. Response system must allow that empowerment and they're able to make their own decisions on what will increase their sense of safety. Any program that supports safety of a victim survivor needs to be sufficiently funded to not only cover the cost of that response required, but also to build the capacity of those of us out there as frontline workers to better understand the technology as a support for that victim survivor and the safety. And that's it for me. Thank you, Lena.
Thanks, Leonie, and it's great to hear the investment that's been made into safe at home plans, and thank you all for sharing. In a moment, we're going to be taking some questions, and I can see one or two have come through, so please continue to send those through. But for now, I want to head back to Karen from Wesnet, and she is going to give us some information for generalist service providers on when to refer to a specialist family and domestic violence service. So I'll hand back over to you. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Lena. So I just thought we'd put up a couple of schematics just around what to do if you are working with either a victim of domestic and family violence or some other form of gender-based violence and or technology-facilitated abuse. It's really the same thing for both, and quite often both things are happening at the same time. So in the first diagram on the left, we're just, our most practical advice is just believe her. If it's technology facilitated and it just doesn't even seem possible or it sounds impossible or weird, just believe her because something is going on. And that's the case as well with domestic and family violence. So she's trust her to be the expert in her own life, and that she's going to make the best decision for herself. But importantly, if she is going to disclose, you might be the first person who she speaks to and who believes her, and how you respond is going to make a really big difference to how things go from that point forward. Remembering also that if she's planning on leaving or has left, that's the most dangerous time, because abusers will escalate their violence if they feel like they're losing control. If you think about domestic and family violence and other forms of violence as power and control dynamic. Give her as much information as you can, so that she can make the best decision that she can for herself. Respect her decisions, so don't call the police or other providers on her behalf without her permission. You may actually inadvertently make her more unsafe or escalate the violence. So just always respecting her decision, and get support. It's a really complex area, so there is some specialised domestic and family violence services around the country. Reach out to those if you're not in one of those now, and try and get some support. And you've seen a lot of good resources through today around some of the places that you can reach out to get expert advice. And then just generally, just recognising what some of those signs are, so educating yourself about what some of those red flags are, responding with appropriate care, and making sure that you do refer appropriately to other services that might be able to provide another piece in the jigsaw to help her empower herself and work to either get out of the situation or make herself safer, and hopefully hold that abuser accountable. Back to you, Lena.
Thanks, Karen. Let's go ahead and take some questions. The first one actually is back to you, Karen. How can an agency become part of the frontline agencies that you train and receive and gain access to the partnership you have with Telstra?
We're hoping that we're going to access some more funding and some more phones shortly. But at the moment, if you visit our phones.wesnet.org.au, you can sign up to be on the waiting list to join the program. We do need agencies to be doing a sort of a case management approach, and to also do risk and safety planning with clients, so that we don't inadvertently endanger women further. And it is also possible to ring us on 1-800-WESNET to see if you can we can refer you to the nearest agency in that network at the moment. So if you do need a phone for a woman, please contact us on 1-800-WESNET, and we will try and help you out.
Thanks, Karen. We've got time for a few more questions if anyone else wants to shoot them through. I'll throw this one back to the full panel. Everything seems to be moving so fast these days. How do you keep on top of changes in technology?
I might jump in and answer from our perspective, because we're dealing with the rapid evolution of technology on a day-by-day basis across a whole range of population groups. And from our point of view, it is a game where we're running all the time to make sure that we've got the most current advice about the way these platforms and devices operate and their privacy and security settings, and we share that freely on our website on esafety.gov.au and also on esafety.gov.au/women. And I believe, I'll just hand over to Karen, because it's not just the technology that is at play here. The technology is the vehicle, it's not necessarily the heart of what's going on. So I'll flip to Karen to answer the rest of the question.
Thanks, Rosalie. I think that's right, and we're also, like the eSafety, struggling to keep up with all of the new and innovative and sometimes creepy ways that perpetrators are misusing technology. And what we advise workers is not to get bogged down on what the technology is or how it's happening, but just to focus on the abusive behaviour that's happening as a result of the technology. So if it's stalking, deal with it as if it's real life stalking. If it's abuse that's happening through text messages and stuff like that. So just focus on dealing with the particular behaviour and how to deal with the bad behaviour, as opposed to necessarily getting bogged down with how it's happening on technology. And certainly resources from eSafety and ourselves and others can really help you try and do that. But yeah, try not to get too bogged down on trying to keep up with tech. Just deal with the behaviour.
Okay, so the next question is from a generalist service provider's point of view. How do we build victim survivor confidence so that they're reaching out to a specialist service when they need to? I'll throw that one to the wide panel as well. Perhaps
Hi,
I'll prompt. Oh, yep, go on. Thank you.
Sorry. I was going to jump in and just say that in building confidence, it's really important to access the training that's available. And as I mentioned, we offer face-to-face and online training around what is tech-facilitated abuse and how a frontline worker can help, use that knowledge and the skills that they've acquired to help their clients navigate their way through what can be a really distressing and complex system, and also the training offered by WESNet. So that's kind of from my point of view at the eSafety office.
Thanks, Rosalie, and it's Karen here, and I'll chime in as well and say that, it's a bit like going to a medical practitioner. You go to your general practitioner for general things, but you would go to a specialist when you need a little bit of extra support about a particular issue. And domestic and family violence can be very complex, and those domestic and family violence specialist services really are trained in and understand all the dynamics and stuff that are going on and the multiplicity of things that are impacting on women around domestic and family violence. So reaching out to those is really good. And the other resource to always remember is 1800-RESPECT, which also provides peer supervision and other kinds of peer resources for frontline workers. So contacting them and as a practitioner to ask for extra support could be one space that one resource that you can also use in that regard.
Thanks, Karen. And just to widen that, we've had a lot of speakers from Victoria today. So if people are working remotely or in an area that's not necessarily supported by specialist family and domestic violence services near them, and they've got complex clients, what's something that they can do, how they can reach out?
There are services in most areas, but I think going through to 1800-RESPECT, if you are in a remote or area that's not serviced by a domestic and family violence service, is good. The alternative is to also contact your state peak body, so DVVIC in Victoria. There's various peaks in New South Wales, Queensland, and there are alliances in most of the other states and territories. You can certainly contact WESNet, and we can put you in touch with the local state peak body to help you try and get in contact with the relevant agencies.
Okay, well, we might leave it there. That's all we have time for, but thank you for sending through your questions and comments. You can see I've just popped up the Ask Izzy socials there, and we'd love for you to support us. And we're also sending out a follow-up email with each of the speaker and the organisation websites. You'll get some information on the Ask Izzy Help at Hand project and our upcoming events. And finally, I'd just like to say thank you to our speakers today. Thank you to NAB Foundation and also Tina from Connecting Up for making this possible. Bye for now. Over to you. Thanks, Tina.
Great. Thanks, Lena. So thank you very much, Lena, Leonie, Liz, Karen and Rosalie for presenting today. And thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you've all learnt a lot from this presentation. If you do have any questions that come to mind later or any feedback about this webinar, please send that through to events@connectingup.org and we can answer those questions offline. Don't forget the recording will be available on our website very shortly and a link will be sent to you. So keep an eye out on your inbox. Again, thank you for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your day and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thank you.